I've seen ads where people have been bragging about their rating on Airbnb.
Yes.
And they're renting out a furnished listing and they say, oh yeah, I'm a great landlord. I've got a 5-star rating or 4.999 stars on Airbnb. And to me, that just screams the bed that I'm going to be renting has been slept on by like thousands and thousands of people.
I'm Haze Hartwig. This is Bamboo, Vancouver's property management and investment podcast. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the show. Happy New Year. We made it through. It's 2024. This is the first show of the new year. And of course, we'll be going through the stats for January, as well as some predictions that we're going to be holding Peter here to for the rest of the year. So if he's wrong, be sure to hold him accountable and send all your hate mail to peter@vancouverrentit.com. So without further ado, welcome back to the show, Peter. Good luck.
Thank you. Yeah, that's kind of rough, but yeah, we'll make some predictions and hopefully they're going to be correct. And yeah, I can hate mail's fine if that's what people want to send. That's okay.
It won't be anything new for a property manager.
Of course, yeah.
So one of the things, you've been on the show a few times, but what did you used to do before you were a property manager?
Before I was a property manager, I worked in the tourism industry, actually. I worked at a marina that did boat rentals and boat tours. And yeah, it started kind of as a summer job that I was doing while I was in school. Mm-hmm. And then I did it for a couple of years after I left school. Thought about being in the tourism industry a little bit, decided that I wanted to pursue a different direction, and then yeah, got my property management license.
Ah, nice. Yeah, and you've been at it for what now? 2 years?
This is the fourth. I'll be going into my fourth year.
Fourth? Just holy cow, yeah. How time flies by. Yeah. Wow. So thinking back though, when you first started, what were some of the rookie mistakes that you look back now and go like, damn, I shouldn't have been doing that?
One of them that actually comes to mind right away is, and I'm kind of going through this because my brother is actually just starting with Vancouver Rent-It. Yeah. So he's kind of, learning the same things. It is when I was scheduling showings, I always used to schedule like one showing. I would get an email and I would get so excited and I would say, oh my God, I have to go show this person right now. Yeah. And then I would show them and they wouldn't want it. And then I'd go get one more email that, an hour later, oh, I got to go show this person. So, I'd end up doing, 4 showings spread across 4 days because I was just so excited. And then I realized, I can just wait 2 days and schedule these all for the same day and that'll be a lot easier. So
we're a little smarter.
Yeah, exactly. I just think I got so excited. I was like, oh my God, I'm getting my first people are interested in seeing this property. I want to go. So, yeah, that was something that comes to mind. It was a little naive, I guess, but
everybody starts there. I mean, I did the same thing when I started too, on both sides. I mean, on the sales side, obviously you go right away, but for the rental side, it moves so much quicker that you just rush out there and say, well, the amount of gas and car time that I have spent rushing around to showings that may or may not show up, especially if you're using, Facebook, then you just ghost you.
Exactly.
So yeah.
Yeah, I think as well, like learning which platforms are good to use, which platforms maybe are still good to use, but are maybe not going to have the best results. So to kind of be more careful with showing people from those because they might just be not great. Just kind of learning, what all the different rental platforms have to offer and stuff like that. Oh, and being more efficient with booking showings, I think is one thing that saved me a lot of time, and as well gotten me some better tenants.
Yeah, for sure, right? So, yeah. Well, with that, we will get into the stats for January. After 3 consecutive decreases, there was a slight $26 increase. It's reported by live.rent, which is actually one of the platforms you were just talking about. Bringing the average to $2,367 for a 1-bed in Greater Vancouver. Have you been seeing an uptick in prices and activity yourself, or
maybe not an uptick in prices, but definitely activity? Mm-hmm. I think we probably touched on this in December, right at the beginning of December. I think we had a show where we talked about the stats and the prices had gone down again, and for the 3 weeks or almost a month following that, it was pretty dead.
Yeah,
didn't do very many showings. There's just like a natural slowdown of the market where most people are, cooking turkey dinner instead of setting up appointments to view properties.
Yeah, absolutely.
There were still some people who were interested. Maybe they had to move for January 1st because their landlord was selling or something or moving back in. But other than those people, I don't think there were many people who say, hey, January will be a great time or December will be a great time to find a new place to live. So,
although we do have some influx with the set of students, like obviously September is the big one, but I've noticed that there has been a lot more students looking around because January is
for the second term.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, for sure. But definitely pretty quiet. So I'm not surprised that it's, started to pick up a little bit. Even the first week of January is still a little bit slower than you would expect, as everybody comes out of hibernation and wakes up a little bit and says, okay, well, maybe time to find a place to live or whatever they need to do. So, not surprising that there's a little bit of an uptick in price. I mean, it's not significant, but we'll probably see it continue to increase month over month. Until the summer and carry on through the summer.
Yeah, that's generally the traditional practice of what happens, I guess, as it were. So now, just for the listeners that haven't heard of it before, the reason why we're using a one-bedroom unfurnished for all of our averages, and when we're talking about the price per square foot, et cetera, that we use the unfurnished one-bedroom. The reason for this, of course, is because that's level 1. That's the base level. Obviously, a bachelor will be a little bit less, and a 2-bedroom and 3-bedroom, so on and so forth, will be more. So, for those of you who are just new to the channel, that is what we are using when we're speaking about averages and price per square foot and so on and so forth. The average price per square foot is at $3.04 per square foot, with the top being Vancouver proper, North Van being second, and Burnaby being third. This is typical. Now we're getting back into more traditional. Every once in a while we get a new building, of course, and the price per square foot gets knocked out of whack. I think New West was up at $5 at some point in time
because of a bunch of new builds.
Exactly, right. So it's just the typical way. That being said, of course, price per square foot is not the end all be all for pricing. What do you kind of use for your pricing, and what are some considerations that you take into when you're trying to price a place just right off the hop?
Mostly just other comparable units in the area. So what I first started to do is I take a look on Craigslist because that's kind of the predominant platform in BC. So I take a look on Craigslist, look for units that are in the area that are around the same size, same number of bedrooms and bathrooms, and then take a look at the photos. Do the photos look kind of similar? Is the one unit super dated versus another one? And then kind of try and make conclusions based on what else is out there, which is, if I was looking for a unit for myself, which I have done in the past, it's exactly what I would do. I would take a look on Craigslist, look around to see what's available in the area that I like with the kind of size that I like. I definitely wouldn't be doing price per square foot calculations necessarily. I think maybe people do them a little bit kind of in their heads. They go, well, this one's this much and it's 600 square feet, and this one's the same price, but it's 1,000. Yeah. Obviously you're going to draw a bit of a conclusion from that size difference, but I don't think anybody's sitting down with maybe some people are with an Excel spreadsheet and figuring out price per square foot. But to be honest, not a huge deal when you're just renting. Yeah. When you're purchasing, I guess price per square foot is obviously different because
to some degree,
to some degree, because people they want to make sure they're purchasing every little piece that they can get for the best price, I guess. But for renting, your kind of needs are number of bedrooms, number of bathrooms, and the kind of how the finishings are and how renovated the place is, I think is.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely a difference in the hierarchy, I guess, of desires between sales and rental, which is actually interesting because I was going to touch in on this, that sometimes you'll run into landlords that are talking about that they have this view or brand name appliances and stuff like this, which is interesting because on the sales side, that does kind of play into some effect. But on the tenancy side, I mean, do your appliances work? Great. Yes, yeah. And off they go. Like a tenant generally has a different hierarchy of what they're looking for.
I have had people come in and kind of take a closer look at some of that stuff and take a look at the appliances and make comments on it and stuff like that. And most of the time, those people are renters who are also homeowners or are previously homeowners and they've sold or something like that. They've been in the game for a while and they kind of know exactly what they want. And to be honest, sometimes those people aren't going to get exactly what they want because they're just renting and they don't really have the option to negotiate on changing all the appliances to Miele or whatever. Exactly. They just don't have the option. So, but in general, nobody's going in and saying, oh my God, these appliances aren't the right brand or whatever, or I don't have a double broiler oven or all this stuff. In general, right? Obviously at a certain price point, maybe people do look at more at that stuff. But when we're talking about a, 1-bedroom, unfurnished downtown, most people aren't going to be making that distinction and are really just going to be, hey, do I want to live here for a year or two?
I guess barring that they're not that like marigold green or whatever from the 70s or 80s that all of our parents had,
exactly,
which oddly enough still work because they
yeah.
made them to last. So I don't know what they've changed now, but they still work. If you could repaint those, we'd be good to go.
Yeah, exactly.
So with the pricing though, because you were talking about negotiating and that, when do you decide that it's time to revisit the price? Because obviously it's not an exacting science with pricing. When do you make that call? Is it 2 weeks or no calls or?
Usually, it depends on the owner's timeline, right? So if the owner gives me a call today and says we want it rented for February 1st, well, we've got 3 weeks. So we're going to have to get into action very quickly and we're going to have to be more aggressive on the price. And basically, if say I was going to put the ad live today, which is the January 8th, if I don't get any responses in 2 days, we have to lower the price.
Yeah,
and then if we don't get any responses 2 days after that, we're going to lower the price again. If it's for March 1st, we have a little more room, so maybe wait 4 days. But if you're not getting any responses in the first 4 days of posting the ad, barring any sort of external market factors, people probably aren't interested in your place. Like generally, also, if I sometimes I'll delete old ads and repost them, and then I'll get like 2 or 3 responses because people are always kind of refreshing the page and looking for the ones that are just posted. So if yours pops up on that list, they'll click on it. So that can be an effective technique to kind of see if you can jolt a sad, old, tired listing alive.
Well, that's one of the things too that I've noticed. I'm not 100% convinced that when you hit renew on Craigslist that it actually puts it back up to the top.
See, this is a little trick. I don't do the renew. You fully delete and then repost.
That's what I started doing,
which takes a little more time. The renew thing, I don't know about that one. I don't think it. I think it just says that it's renewed it, but it doesn't. Bump it up to the top. I'm not sure.
Yeah. Plus, I just noticed that when you take it down and repost it, you usually get significantly more action
for sure.
So I would suggest for any of the DIY landlords, if you're not getting the action and you do make that change to your price or your photos or whatever you've changed, to maybe just take it down and put it back up, just because you might as well err on the side of caution, right?
For sure. Yeah. However, that's not, just deleting and reposting isn't a replacement for changing the price.
No.
if you need to change the price and you're really not getting any responses, then you have to do it. Unfortunately, the market, I'm not choosing what the price is. The people are.
Oh, absolutely. I actually just did a video on that saying that the market speaks and it may be cruel, but it doesn't lie.
Exactly. So. Yeah. I saw that you said that. So yeah, it's so true. Sometimes you have to do it. And if your place comes up for rent in January, you might have to make some concessions that you wouldn't have to maybe if it came up for rent in August. But it just is what it is. I mean, you could wait until August to re-rent it for $200 higher and leave it empty for 6 months.
That'd probably be ill-advised.
Up to you. Yeah, that's up to somebody. So something else I've noticed while we're talking about kind of refreshing on platforms is I've had a couple of Facebook ads that have been online on Facebook Marketplace for a couple weeks. Yeah. And then after a while, I just don't get any responses for those ones. And honestly, I think Facebook is just a horrible platform, but it does get lots of eyes. You get lots of traffic. Yeah. So I've just been fully deleting them and then reposting them, and then right away getting a couple of responses. So
like maybe they're working with the same
But I feel like it's even worse. I feel like Facebook is kind of just like completely filtering your ad out. After 3 weeks, they just go, this person's ad is
it's not drawing.
There's no point in showing it, and it's like harder to find or something like that. So just something to be aware of.
I guess it's as well because like Marketplace is busy. There is people putting things up all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Like if you look for a car and renew or refresh your browser, it's a whole new set all of a sudden. Like there are a lot of people using that.
Yeah.
But the quality of the inquiry is usually not that great, I find. Usually lower.
I get, this sounds funny, but I get very excited when I get a Craigslist email come in and for somebody who says, hey, I'm really interested in this place, and they give me all these nice details about their life, versus somebody who clicks the is this available button on Facebook Marketplace. When I see that, I just die a little inside.
Because it's like,
I just know
90% they're not going to respond.
90% it's not going to be worth it. So yeah, just a little funny thing about the differences in the platforms that.
Yeah, there's always like little intricacies on that. And with the pricing, sometimes you'll get a landlord that wants to just shoot for the stars, and they say, oh, we'll just try it and see what happens. What are your thoughts on that? Do you think this is a good practice? I mean, obviously, you don't want to leave any money on the table, but...
I actually don't mind doing that.
Mm-hmm.
If their expectations are such that if I don't get any responses after 2 days, we can lower the price.
Yeah, fair.
But like, I don't want to just sit, personally, I don't, and the owner shouldn't want to do this either. I don't want to sit on a listing that's, $500 overpriced for like a month.
Yeah.
Like, if we don't have to. Of course, the client is... If the client wants that, then sure, but I don't think it's worth doing. But yes, if somebody wants to shoot for the stars for, add a couple $100, no problem. Mm-hmm. The thing I think they should maybe be aware of is that if you really, really gouge your tenants, there's the potential for them to not want to stay for longer. Whereas if, if you just rent something for market price, they might look around and say, well, I'm getting an okay deal based on the other places on the market, so there's no reason to leave.
Yeah,
right. Whereas after a year, if somebody reevaluates their rent and they go, man, I'm getting absolutely gouged here.
Yeah.
By $300, $400, $500, because maybe they didn't know, maybe they were from out of town, they didn't know what the prices were. It's definitely possible that somebody might go, I could move to a new place and upgrade maybe, or at least side grade for cheaper.
Absolutely, right.
So
save that $400, right?
Yeah. So it really depends. But I think it's not the worst thing in the world to do, but I would advise against shooting too much for the stars.
Yeah.
Maybe keep it at the lower stars.
Yeah, maybe just like be honest with yourself. If you're not getting the calls in the first couple of days, you took your shot, it wasn't there. Move on.
Exactly. Yes. But I think trying to get, market price or maybe slightly higher than market price to start is totally fine as long as you're willing to adjust if necessary.
Yeah, absolutely. So we said at the top of the show that we're going to get into some of the predictions. So let's just kind of ballpark. Don't worry, we won't actually hold you to the fire, man. It's okay. We'll just blame it on you, brother. So the interest rates, the Bank of Canada is supposed to meet on January 25th, so in a couple of weeks, and a lot of people figure that they're going to hold the rates where they currently are. What are you thinking? Do you think it's going to be where it is? Go down? Go up? What are your thoughts?
I think they'll probably hold the rates for a little bit longer, and then start to decrease them. I don't think we're going to stay in this super high interest rate period for too much longer, but I don't think it's going to be quite yet. I think, we talked about this a little bit earlier off the show that potentially, by the summer, they'll start to start to come down. But I don't think maybe January 25th. I don't think it'll quite be yet.
Yeah.
So people might just have to hold on for a little bit longer. But that's a relatively uneducated guess from myself. So please, no hate mail.
So yeah, I'm in the same camp as you. I think that they're probably going to hold it for the next maybe one or two at least. I would suspect, obviously I don't have a crystal ball, but somewhere around May, that they may start coming down. So we'll see what's going on with that. Now, a few months ago, we had Phil from Citadel Law come in, and he was speaking about some changes regarding laws in collections. In essence, that a garnishment order, if it's filled, will remain over having to refile over and over. Do you think that will change anything, maybe bring more landlords back to the market? Because some of them are leaving their place empty because they're afraid of if anything goes wrong and they don't know what to do type of thing. What are your thoughts on that, dude?
Potentially. I still think the process, like the RTB process plus the small claims registering monetary order process, is complicated for most people and takes too long in general. That I think just all of that just does make people shy away from. It has, I know people who definitely shy away from long-term rentals because they just say it's just not worth all my time and headache if something goes wrong. I think it's great. I think they should continue to add more options and make it easier for landlords to file judgments against tenants who are delinquent on their payments, and make it easier to file those and stuff like that. But I think changing one small method and making it so the garnishing order doesn't fall off is great, but I think it's not that much of a needle mover. Personally, I still think it. I've got lots of monetary orders pending that I haven't been able to do anything with just because it's difficult. But that is obviously a positive, that as they kind of chip away at it. I still think lots of people out there, they win their RTB case. And then that's kind of where it stops, because the actual RTB process is not too bad. It takes a long time, but you usually eventually get to the end of it, and you get an answer, yes or no, that you won or lost. But then after that, it is quite difficult to know what to do next if you haven't done it before. If you're just a DIY landlord, I think it's difficult. It's relatively difficult for me to navigate, and I've done it before. So I think for somebody who's maybe doing it for the first time, and this also isn't their full-time job, it's probably a little tricky.
The nice part, though, as well, is that it will also work for the tenants, because we've heard also in the news and stuff like this where a tenant will win from the landlord, and then they have to figure out how to collect it. And it might just sort of level the playing field for everybody. And at least it feels almost like it'll give the RTB maybe a little bit more teeth.
I hope so.
For both sides, like both landlord and tenant.
100%. I think it would be wonderful if they could shorten the RTB process to be way quicker, and then also make it easier for tenants and landlords to collect the money that they're owed. If you go through the process and you win as a landlord or a tenant, and then you can't collect the money,
it's almost like a kick in the teeth.
It is, yeah. It'd almost be better if you just lost and then it's like, okay, damn, I lost. And that's it. But if you win and then can't collect it anyways, you feel like you wasted all this time for nothing. Exactly. So, I hope they can continue to make changes. But it's positive that they're at least thinking about it.
At least there's some
doing something. Right? Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So now, speaking of the changes in laws, we did see last year that the rental restrictions for stratas were just done away with. Now, some people thought that this is the fix type of thing. Have you seen much change from this?
There's been I've definitely had a couple of clients who have reached out, or new clients who reached out and said, hey, I used to not be able to rent, and now I'm renting it out. So that's great. That obviously, if I can think about it, maybe 2 or 3 that were like that. There could have been more that just didn't tell me that they were previously in a building that couldn't do it. Every now and then I still see signs on buildings that say no rentals. I guess, the building manager just hasn't taken it down yet or anything like that. But I think it's a good thing. Those strata restrictions, I think, were pretty unnecessary, to be honest.
I noticed on the sales side that almost every building that we went to that had rental restrictions, there was a wait list. So it clearly was something that people wanted.
Yeah.
And it just, I'm glad that they've done away with this finally.
And I'm sure there's some people who would say, oh, well, it's so much worse for owners. But if there are owners, if there was huge wait lists in the building, it probably means that the majority of owners wanted it, wanted to be able to rent it anyways. So I think, unfortunately, for like the very small minority that was like completely against it, you're kind of SOTL because there was obviously a lot of people that wanted it. So I think that was very positive. Yeah. But again, a small, drop in a large ocean that is, the housing difficulty. So
the problem is that we need to have a sudden rush of available units, which would then lower the prices. But right now, 5 new units come on, 5 new units get rented. So
yeah,
we're kind of in that same
steady state. Yeah, it's a bit of like a trickle, right? When they all, I think you're right. Like a big rush would kind of totally change the market. Yeah. But yeah, as they kind of come in one by one, or a couple here, a couple there, and I think we're going to talk about this a little later, changing some of the Airbnb rules, which are all positive. These are all positive changes, but I don't think, we're going to wake up one day and be like, oh my God, affordable housing for absolutely everybody who lives here.
Yeah, that's a little bit of a lofty goal, a great goal.
Yeah.
But actually, we'll talk about the Airbnb right now, actually, since the rules are supposed to be changing on May 1st of this year. That's when they actually take hold. Essentially, we'll restrict it to a principal residence and or a secondary suite. So basically, a lot of these condos that are being Airbnb'd right now can't be, or not legally at least. Mm-hmm. So do you think from this that are we going to see more furnished rentals, or do you think people are just going to cash out and sell if the rates drop, because then the market might pick up as far as the sales price? Like, where do you think this is going to go?
I definitely think a lot of those are going to convert into long-term rentals. Mm-hmm. I think a lot of people, especially if they've owned for a long time, they might be mortgage free, or they might have a much smaller mortgage compared to the value of their home now. Mm-hmm. So those people, sure, they're going to be losing income from not being able to Airbnb it, but not too bad to still be able to rent it out at a, relatively strong price, which, prices are for rentals are pretty high these days. Absolutely. Anyways, I think Airbnb prices are astronomical compared to them, mm-hmm. but I think those people, hopefully they've been saving a little bit, saving some of that money instead of spending it on other things. Yeah. In the meantime, while they've been able to take advantage of Airbnb, at least in the city of Vancouver. So yeah, I do think a lot of those are going to be converted to long-term rentals. I think a lot of those are going to be converted to long-term furnished rentals for a little bit, and then people are going to realize that unfurnished for long-term makes way more sense. And that their IKEA furniture isn't adding much to the value. Yeah. I think I've probably said this on the show before when we talked about it last time, but I've seen ads where people have been bragging about their rating on Airbnb.
Yes,
and they're renting out a furnished listing, and they say, "Oh yeah, I'm a great landlord. I've got a 5-star rating, or 4.999 stars on Airbnb." And to me, that just screams the bed that I'm going to be renting has been slept on by like thousands and thousands of people. Right. So personally, if I was renting something for long term, I would not want a furnished place. And I would especially not want a furnished place that used to be an Airbnb. Yeah. Probably a lot of wear and tear on that furniture, a lot of miles on the couch.
Yeah, exactly. Right? Like maybe just get rid of it.
Yeah. Right? And I mean, that's not always the case, but in general, I think a lot of these landlords will realize, and they'll start to slowly unfurnish stuff, throw stuff out, and then there will be probably more long-term rentals on the market, mm-hmm. which is positive. I'm sure there's going to be people still Airbnb-ing anyways. Hopefully the enforcement is there. I know that sometimes the enforcement's been pretty lax, although I think maybe at the same time they announced this change, mm-hmm. they said that they were increasing the penalties by like 10 times. Yeah. So I'd imagine maybe some of that money can be used for better enforcement. If they're finding more, at least, right? If they're finding people 10 times the amount, hire 10 times more staff to check out these Airbnbs. To be honest, I feel like it's maybe not that difficult. You can just go into Airbnb and look at all you have to do is book the place, and it'll give you the address, and then you go on, pull the title of. Although you don't even have to pull the title if you're the government. Yeah, you just can go. Well, pull it, but it doesn't cost you anything. Yeah, and then they can just look right there who the owner is. Great, tack a fine onto their property tax or whatever they need to do. Boom, easy. So I think it shouldn't be too difficult. I think they just need a little bit of manpower to do it, and I think it's positive change. There are so many Airbnbs mm-hmm. listed. One kind of downside, I think, and I think we probably maybe talked about this before, is kind of upcoming events. Yeah, the World Cup's going to be here. Hotel prices will probably be insane if a lot of Airbnbs are banned. Maybe it'll be like the Olympics when people rented out their places. They'd go away for 2 weeks and rented out their primary residence. Maybe people will do stuff like that, which would be within the rules. But I think there's definitely going to be the big changes coming, and Airbnb is I think it's going to make a big difference. So
one of the things also with the events, was talking with a past client. They actually work in the film industry, and they've been saying that one of the things that's going to be a little bit trickier is that when they have people coming into town, a lot of the film industry has been using Airbnb. So this will also be kind of a different setup. I'm almost wondering if perhaps some of the film industry will long-term rent X unit and just keep on swapping their people out gradually.
That is actually
good,
good to consider, yeah, because usually I feel like those TV productions and movie productions are like 2 to 6 months.
Yeah.
Maybe longer. They could be longer, but I think that kind of seems to be the amount. I get some phone calls every now and then with somebody who says, hey, do you have any, I work for Netflix and I'm looking to put a cast member of a show in a place for, 3 or 4 months or something like that. In general, we mostly work with long-term rentals, so we usually don't have stuff available, but every now and then we do. But that does make sense. The Netflix, big media giant, could just rent, a couple places and have their cast members stay there for 3 months, and then the next one comes and 3 months there, and not a bad idea actually.
Yeah, so, but no, people are going to have to do some adjustments. We're going to see how they end up there with the rules as well. A lot of the DIY landlords use the RTB1, which is, the standard issue rental agreement from the government. I did notice from looking over them that there's a lot of things that they're silent on. What are a couple of things that you add to the RTB1, your addendums, to sort of help protect for when you're doing placement only?
Most of the things that we usually do, or the things that I usually add, is especially an addendum that kind of clarifies some things. The RTB1 is a little bit vague.
Yeah.
And honestly, the Residential Tenancy Act at times can be a little vague, especially when they talk about things like wear and tear and stuff like that. Now, and even if some of the things that I add into these leases, they might not necessarily be like, fixed clauses about stuff, but it's just something that the tenant would read and go, maybe that's like a bit of a definition of wear and tear, or maybe this is something that I shouldn't do or should do to keep the place in good condition. So kind of just adding more stuff to it, because it's pretty bare bones, honestly. Some of the clauses are just like one sentence that doesn't define any of the terms. And usually like defining what stuff means, or the useful life of furniture or whatever, the useful life of finishings, that stuff's really important to kind of have in there. Even though some of that stuff is in the Residential Tenancy Act, if it's not in the lease, some people might not look at the Residential Tenancy Act and think about it. So just making the lease, I know this sounds silly, but to make it longer so that there's more stuff in there so that people read through it and it makes them think, maybe I shouldn't do this, or
absolutely, like you want to be as least ambiguous as possible. It's interesting, actually. Was speaking with somebody and they ran into a bit of an issue that their tenant had left for 5 months, so they didn't know. And so a good clause to have in there is to alert the owner or property manager, as it can cause problems such as notices from the building if you're in a strata, or even in some cases, it might invalidate your insurance because
if there's not somebody checking on it every X amount of days or whatever it is.
Yeah, and nobody knows. So like if you have a flood while your tenant's on vacation or doing whatever they're doing, and no one was checking on it, you
could
maybe taking it on the chin.
Your homeowner's insurance. Yeah, that's actually a really good point. And little things like that might seem insignificant, like, just tell them you're going away, can be very important. So
which is just something that people wouldn't think of generally.
And that definitely aren't in the RTB1 standard lease agreement, but good to put in an addendum to, make sure the tenant knows that that's something they should do.
Oh, absolutely. So since you're speaking of stratas, the most active listing type, not surprisingly, is apartments at 78%, with townhomes being 6% and houses being 4%. Partial house has been fairly high the past couple of months, 12 and 13%. And when we're speaking of partial house, we mean basement suites and shared, essentially. And that, do you think this is a result of the sustained high interest rates, or what do you think is driving that?
That people are kind of like splitting stuff up So that makes sense. There's definitely some people who would maybe keep a basement suite empty in periods of lower interest because their mortgage was lower and they don't really need that mortgage helper. Maybe they save it for friends and family who are coming to stay or something like that. Definitely makes sense that people would go, maybe I should, I've got a 2-bedroom, mortgage or mortgage helper downstairs. Maybe I should help the mortgage and use it. So that does make sense. And then also, dividing up houses. Maybe they previously rented out the house altogether. Maybe there's 2 suites in it, but just to make it easier on themselves, they rented it out altogether so that there was just only maybe one family living there, just for make it easier for themselves. But maybe they go, I can probably get more money if I split it up into 2 suites, or at least have now 2 separate families in there paying more money. So that does make sense that we would see that.
All right. So these active listings, 40% of them were 1-bedrooms and 48 were 2. So they're kind of getting closer to where they are. What is the breakdown of the type of tenant that you're seeing? Are they mostly looking for a 1-bedroom, or are they mostly looking for a 2-bedroom, or what are you feeling there? Definitely
a mix. Right now I've actually got available for rent a mix of 1 and 2 bedrooms. Bit of a mix, I'd say. There's a lot of couples that are still just looking to rent a 1-bed, but there's also a lot of couples that maybe have a bunch of stuff. They've got bikes, they've got a pet or something or whatever. They've just got more stuff, so they need a 2-bedroom, or maybe they work from home. So that's definitely a consideration, is that even though they maybe don't need all that space, they kind of do need all that space. Definitely there's still a mix I've seen of 1 and 2 bedrooms. It's pretty rare these days to see a single person renting a 1-bed. Honestly, I have a couple tenants that are, but everybody's in a couple, it seems. Now, whether that be because, everybody's got really good, healthy relationships, or because they need a little bit of extra...
Straight up necessity.
Yeah, straight up necessity. Need a little bit of extra help to pay the rent. I've definitely pretty rare to see a single person for a 1-bed. It's pretty rare.
Yes, and speaking of this with the 1-bedrooms and 2-bedrooms and that, now that we've kind of, we're a few years past the plague of 2020 where everyone was working at home, have you seen people kind of moving back to the city and not needing that extra den anymore, or workspace since they're going back to the office?
I still see lots of people say, we both work from home.
Yeah, okay.
It seems pretty standard now. A lot of the time, I actually ask, honestly, if it's a 2-bedroom or even a 1-bedroom, I'll just ask, just to make conversation. But I'll usually ask, like, do you guys work from home, or do you work somewhere like nearby? And a lot of people, at least one of the people works from home, usually. That's what I've sort of
sustained.
That's what I've been seeing. And even just, talking to colleagues and friends and stuff like that, a lot of them went hybrid at least, or went work from home and never went back because,
It seems nicer, actually, to be perfectly honest. But
I think I think also a lot of companies sold their office space, or not sold, or sold or stopped renting their office space because they realized, why rent a huge office space where none of the employees want to come to anyways?
Actually, in February, we're planning to have a few more people from the commercial side of rentals, including our illustrious manager at some point in time, Mo, will be coming down to explain the ins and outs on the commercial side, since you and I generally, and Vancouver Rent-It, specialize in residential per se. So that'll be kind of interesting. We'll see if they did actually sell off their commercial space, or
I don't have any to back that up. It just seems like that's what's happened.
So remember, hate mail Peter.
skip the hate mail.
So and you're talking about coupling up because of possible necessities. 4 out of the 5 most expensive cities in Canada are in BC, with West Van being number 1, North Van being number 2, and Vancouver proper being number 3. Typical for our area. Least expensive place right now is Surrey and Langley. So things are getting kind of back down to normal, where they generally lie. It's not too much of a shock there. And we were talking earlier about Live.Rent. They actually share their income to rent ratio of users on their site, and they're actually listed at 50% of being spent on rent, which is astronomically highly. Generally speaking, they economically should be about 30%, but I mean, in Vancouver, that's probably not going to work. Is this what you're seeing out there on your applications that come in?
Definitely not that high. I'd imagine maybe that's like a little bit of a weird reporting kind of thing. Maybe some people don't. Maybe some people put their net income as opposed to their gross income, because it's usually you would use gross income for that. But definitely, I've had some applications from folks who are definitely on the edge. Maybe up at 40% or a little bit higher. It seems pretty normal.
Like 50 is a little too
50
high,
is pretty high. Yeah, that's pretty high. That doesn't really leave you much room. Also, something that I've been checking more recently has been savings. Just because, especially if they have that higher income to rent ratio, they're up at 40%. Let's see if they've got some additional savings. As well, I've also been checking on our application. We ask what kind of car they drive. If somebody's driving like a brand new car, usually they're paying a lot of money for that car per month.
Extra overhead.
But if somebody doesn't have a car, well, there you go. You're not spending $500 a month on your car payment or something like that. So that does kind of leave a little bit of extra.
Yeah, it's a good,
just it's not, maybe it's not as tangible as some things, but it's just something, any little additional information that I can kind of glean from our application. And if somebody's driving like a brand new like 2023 electric vehicle, but they're only they're making $75,000 a year and they're trying to rent something for $3,000 a month, and you go, maybe you don't really, maybe you have no money left over at the end of the month, or something like that. So
it's sort of like I take into account, especially I came from the service industry before here, and that of where they work, because tips obviously they can fluctuate, but if you're working at Black and Blue or you're working at Denny's, obviously your tips at Black and Blue are going to be significantly higher than they were at Denny's. So even though both are making, I don't know if they're both doing minimum wage, but if they were, you can take a higher tip count at a higher end place as opposed to a very entry level place. No knocking on anyone who works at Denny's, by the way. But
of course, you're just probably going to get lower tips at Denny's, I'd imagine, than at Black and Blue.
So so the intricacies that there's no cut and dry.
There's always little tiny things to consider when selecting an applicant, or kind of just looking at how somebody fits into the whole rental picture. And the more information that we can give our clients, then the more information they have to make an educated decision.
Oh, exactly. I mean, ultimately the owner signs the bottom line. We're simply agents that kind of guide the boat, but the owner's driving it.
Exactly. Yeah. And like I said, the more information we can get from an application, even things like what kind of car they're driving does say a lot about a person's finances. Even if you don't actually look at their finances, you can still just tell this person's spending a lot of money on car payments or whatever. So
actually, and I did have a call from a landlord actually that they had a leak into their unit from the strata above, because the strata, or the unit above in that strata water tank, had failed. And it's interesting because the units that we have, and this is a tip for any landlords that are out there that have a hot water tank, for about $20 you can get a alarm that's a moisture alarm that tells you if your water tank's about to go. Because they don't just burst. They rust and they leak a bit and all this. And usually the hot water tank is in a not used closet type of thing, right? Yeah. So just a simple tip for any landlords that are listening: if you do have a hot water tank, whether it be in a strata or in a house, go down to Home Depot and get yourself a $20 moisture alarm, just so that you can save yourself thousands of dollars worth of damage, as well as insurance and whatnot. So
that is a good tip, actually. I think I've, off the top of my head, I've probably got 3 or 4 units under management that in condos that have hot water tanks. It's pretty rare these days.
Absolutely.
Pretty rare. And I'm always surprised when I go in for the first time and I open a closet and go, oh, there's a hot water tank in there. Because it's pretty rare. But I can think off the top of my head 3 or 4 that do. So very good point.
Yeah. Do you have any other tips for prevention that you can think of off the top of your head?
If you're a do-it-yourself landlord, just checking in with your tenant every now and then. I know maybe some people don't want to message them or don't want to bother them, but to be honest, a simple email saying, hey, is everything all good? Can save you a lot of headache in the future. Maybe that prompts the tenant to take a look around for something, because some people maybe just live somewhere and they just have the blinders on and they wake up, they go to work, and then they come home and go to sleep, and they're not really looking at something that maybe a property manager would go in an inspection, would go in and take a look. So even if you're not doing an inspection every 2 months, if you're only doing an annual inspection or every 6 months or something like that, just checking in with your tenant and saying, hey, how's it going? Notice any leaks, notice any something.
It also will build a good relationship with the tenant. I mean, if they know that you care, then they will care.
Care a little more too.
Exactly. Like they may just tell you that there's some really annoying, dumb thing like a cracked light switch cover or something. But if you go there and fix it, then this just brings the good juju.
It builds a lot of goodwill for sure.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right?
I always say to clients, when they say, oh, should we fix this before the unit is rented out or something like that? If it's a really minor thing, absolutely. You got to start the tenancy off on the right foot. The place should be clean, should be all fixed.
Yeah.
And
all your light bulbs should work.
All the light bulbs should work. To be honest, I usually give people about a week or two once they've moved in. I say, hey, if any of the light bulbs burn out in the first week or two of you living here, you replace them and then send me the receipt and we'll reimburse you, because it's pretty unfair if a light bulb that's supposed to last 50 years burns out 1 week into their tenancy,
right?
Because the last tenants used it for 50 years,
Yeah. Well, it's funny that you bring about the 50 years is that I suggest to a lot of landlords just to switch all their light bulbs to the LED ones.
That last.
They just last
a billion hours. Yeah.
And this way you never have to deal with this guy didn't replace it or whatever it may be.
Yeah.
As well as the fact that generally I find that it's easier to determine what went wrong. So if you have all LED light bulbs and all of a sudden one doesn't work, it's probably not the light bulb.
Yeah, probably an electrical issue. Yeah.
Exactly. In which case, you didn't want to just to save time and headaches, you know what I mean? Obviously test the light bulb first, put a different one in there, whatnot. But it does help sort of just make everything a lot smoother, because that way you never have to change a light bulb essentially for the life of the building. Yeah. So, I mean, it's pretty easy to deal with, right?
Good tip for sure.
Excellent. So I think we pretty much covered everything that we've got for January. How can listeners find you?
Well, if they're going to send hate mail, then they can't. But if they're going to reach out and they have questions about the rental market or anything like that, Peter@VancouverRent-It.com is my email address, and our website, VancouverRent-It.com, and all of our contact information is on there.
Yeah, and I'll have everything there in the description below as well, so it'll be pretty easy to find. So thank you for everybody who's tuned in. If you've lasted this long, much appreciated. Do be sure to subscribe and review us. It will help us get more information out there to more people. Come February will actually be our 1 year anniversary that Bamboo has been around. And our next show that we will be having, we'll have the Mortgage Geek, Jordan Kofsky, will be out there to explain to that. It happens to fall right on the 25th, so we will know exactly what happened with those mortgage rates. So thank you for everyone tuning in. This has been Bamboo, Vancouver's investment and property management podcast.